Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of Concept Art Portfolio Reviews. This is going to be a series on the channel that I'm going to try to keep as an ongoing thing. I'm going to try to do them at minimum once a month, maybe two every like 2 weeks, but we'll see how that goes. I'm going to try to keep them very casual. I'm not going to do like a lot of editing or anything like that, and probably do like 2 to 3 per episode. So the purpose of these episodes is to help struggling students and artists find like a more direct path to the games or animation industry, because oftentimes I see students that email me saying that they're struggling to know what exactly to put in their portfolios to land that first job. And I think that's totally reasonable and like a common problem for students entering the industry, because if you go to ArtStation, for example, a lot of what you see there is maybe not the best representation of what you should actually be putting in your portfolio, right? A lot of people on ArtStation are putting like their best work or like more illustration-based things rather than actual concept art. And concept art is actually what will get you a job, right? And so we have to define like what that is and how you can cater your portfolio more to help attract those art directors to your work and say, hey, we really want this person on our team. So with that said, this is the first episode of Concept Art Portfolio Reviews. I'm going to review 2 artists in this first episode. And if you want to submit your work to be reviewed, all you have to do is comment a link to your portfolio in this video below. Tell me exactly what it is that you want to do in the industry, what you want to, where you want to work, etc., and have at least 5 pieces in your portfolio. So that gives me a decent variety of work to look at and be able to critique. Okay. So with that, let's get started. Okay, Aziz, let's go ahead and take a look at your stuff here. So right off the bat, I think what's cool about your portfolio here is that you've got some interesting branding going on. So let's go ahead and jump into one of these. I actually feel like we've talked about this one in the past. I might be mistaken, but I feel like I've seen this image for sure. I felt like I gave you advice on this. So let's talk about what's working well in this image in particular before we move on to some of the other pieces. So what I really like here is that you're clearly highlighting a focal point and a story moment with your character here in the scene, right? So what's working well is, for example, the lighting on the character highlights the back, and then the background over here is dark so that she stands out against the background, right? So you've got this light against dark and then light against dark. So that contrast in your focal point area is working really nicely. And then you've got her clearly staring at some sort of map or whatever across from her desk. Now, what I could say here is that you could probably increase like the size and the space that this thing takes up. Like maybe it's a lot more crazy, right? In terms of like the map is bigger, the strings across the map are more prominent. You could take a look at like True Detective. There's a scene where the main character is in a storage garage and he has something similar set up, and take a look at that for reference. But I do like the things that you have laid out throughout the environment. I think in general, the environment caters to the narrative very well. Like nothing is distracting. It supports the personality of this person and the story moment that you're trying to tell. So I think that's good. If we move on to some of these other pieces here, actually before I do that, I want to say, because I took a brief look at the portfolio. When I look at the Knights and Zombies series and then this one as well, one thing that I'm getting is that you're running off of kind of like the popular things of the ArtStation, right? Or like Last of Us, or like, for example, in this Knights series, like the Kit Bash series that was released. I would say try to push yourself to do stuff that maybe is more unique to you, or represents like maybe more about who you are, and doesn't rely on either like pre-existing IPs or assets that you've purchased through some sort of means, right? So because that'll really push you to try to evaluate your skill level in like modeling things yourself, setting up scenes yourself, and stories that, again, where you don't already have like a 90% head start. And the reason I say that is like if you're building a portfolio for games, sometimes in game production you're going to have access to these type of models and things like that for illustrations, but a lot of times you're just going to have to come up with things yourself. So challenging yourself in that way is really going to be beneficial for you. So with that said, let's go ahead and just take a look at this shot and see what is working and what we can improve on. What is working really well is I think the cluttering of the characters here, right? We do get a bit of repetition here where like I can tell that there's like the same character pose like just repeated all over the place. But like in here, for example, I think it works really well. The simplification of the characters where you just see like the torches back here is really nice. Same thing over here. I think the rain here is working well, but in the foreground we could potentially, I would like look at screenshots of films and see like how it looks, like how rain looks in the foreground. Also things like brick and the characters here are going to have a lot more specularity. Things like the ground as well over here is you're going to get like puddles of water that are probably like shining the reflection in the sky. Like it looks like you have like a very diffused overhead light here, so you're going to get some reflection there probably. But I think the big one for me with this particular shot is that you have the characters kind of crunched into the corner here, and I feel like you should probably have them in the center over here, where like they're front and center, and they're like really prominent in the frame, right? Rather than everything being crunched over. I think that's going to help with the framing of your story, and instead of like having this very big massive space that doesn't really give me much information or narrative like value, let's say, right? Because if the narrative value lies in the knights here defending against this big crowd, then what you're really saying is that the crux of the story lies in this section of the painting, and everything kind of over here is not really important. So you take this, move it over here, and I think you're going to get a lot stronger composition. And you can like fill this space with like, more of this type of stuff here. Okay. So let's go to another piece. And then I'll kind of give my overall impression of like what I think you need to work on. So I think this works nicely as like you're setting a clear focal point. The characters around it are focused on like supporting these two in the frame. One thing I think you can work on more is like atmosphere throughout the scene, like adding in like some areas of smoke and fog to help separate different layers of characters, kind of like you're doing here, but like also apply it here. Again, look at movie stills and other artists and see how they approach that. Also specularity on the characters, breakup of the metal patterns on here. I think some stuff gets a little like 3D feeling. So that's kind of like some general notes on that. For this one here, again, like the specularity thing with the wetness, I think it works right here. The close-up in general, like it looks nice, right? But again, it's just some small things that will help to really push the quality of this shot. This like rounding thing that we have going around the head, I would maybe get rid of that. I think it's a little distracting because I noticed it, and for stuff like that, we don't want to notice like whatever effect you're trying to achieve here. It's like kind of distracting to the overall shot. So I'll go to here and then I'll give my final thoughts. So I think like this type of stuff is really nice. Like if you're trying to get into games, this and this are things that you will definitely need to be able to know how to do. My critique with this is that I would like to see you do this with something that's not objects that you can get off of like any sort of asset store, right? So things that you have to design yourself. Again, moving back to like moving away from pre-purchased or pre-designed assets and trying to focus on like design for yourself. Okay. Because like as somebody who helps with hiring artists, right, that is the thing that I look for, like your design ability. Like most artists that come through job applications all know how to render, right? Like to an extent, like they have rendering ability, but design ability is a much harder thing to learn how to do and also hire like artists that are good at it. So things like this, right? Like I've seen this 1,000 times. I don't necessarily need an artist to like show me what that looks like. But if you said, I want this, but what would it look like in like steampunk version of it, right? Like show me that. Pile of clothes, like again, I don't really need that stuff. So again, that I think for in general for you, there's like a very clear distinction of what you want to do, right? Like you're doing kind of the one pixel brush narrative moments, and you want to work in games. But if you want to work in games, then you need to provide me more design work, right? That shows original problem solving, right? That is separate from doing an illustration, right? I want to see like the actual design process, right? So I want to see more process stuff. I want to see more production work and design originality. And then I think you'll be well on your way, because I think in general your rendering ability and stuff like that is pretty close. Like it's good, yeah, but can be improved a little bit more. So like if there's some things that are going to really impact to the greatest extent your ability to get a job, is going to be providing more design work. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And again, let's focus on design, less on more and more like illustration based pieces. Leia Perez, I'm sorry if I get your name incorrect, but let's go ahead and take a look at your portfolio here. So you mentioned to me that if I go back to here, let me see if I can pull this up, pull it off to the side here. But it looks like you are looking to get into concept art, and you wanted advice on your portfolio, right? Like what you need to do as a student to get into the industry, and all that stuff, and what you can do to improve. So in general, when I look at your portfolio, like I can tell that you're still learning and you're still in school, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. I would say as a production portfolio, what I would like you to focus on is finding a voice that is cohesive, right? So when you're learning in school, a lot of times you get past assignments that, render this still life or do this hand study and all that stuff, and you're tempted to throw that all up on your portfolio because, maybe you're proud of it or whatever. And you have good reason to be proud of it, right? If you felt like you made good strides. But as a portfolio, these are things that you may want to keep separate and not part of your main portfolio, right? Because if you want to get hired to do concept art at a game company, these are not things that they are looking to see, right? So the main thing would be cohesiveness within your production, like within your portfolio, professional portfolio, right? You can keep these things to like Instagram or whatever, what have you, right? But like things that are actually concept art related would be what we want to stick to. Okay, so that would be my first advice. Now, if we actually take a look at something in your portfolio here, this looks like it's VALORANT fan art. I can tell by the branding. So like the branding one, like if I didn't look at the icon here, I could still tell that this is the VALORANT branding style. But if we actually take a look at the design here, I would say, keep looking here. Okay, so I would focus on like the fundamentals of the anatomy, because I feel like when you got to the final here, the anatomy of the character got a little elongated and distorted a bit compared to like some of your sketches down here, where the proportions feel a little bit nicer, right? The hips are a little bit wider versus the hips got like narrowed out, and like the legs got elongated here. The head size feels more proportional compared to what we have up here. Like the head feels a little too small and the shoulders a little too narrow. So going back to like the fundamentals and really trying to either find a reference photo for the design that you're trying to do. So like if you're doing this pose, right, and this is what you decide you really want to do for the pose, I would take a photo of yourself or find one online and then use that as like your guiding reference. Okay. And then next, if you're using the Valorant style as your go-to, so then let's go to like, we could take a look at this one, for example. Now, if we take a look at the art style here, and we compare it to what you're doing here, now the thing that makes Valorant's art style unique is the way that this person is rendering the form, right? All the fundamentals are there, but if you look at it, he's using a hard brush, or like hard plane changes to round the form around. Okay, and then analyzing like this section here, right? We've got a plane change here that's hard. We've got a plane change here, and then the way that he's using the highlights, right? Like how could you approach your workflow to get this look, right? It looks like he used like the lasso tool, filled it in, and then like within that lasso tool used like this color to kind of half tone that. So really dissecting the style that you're trying to achieve as well as the anatomy of the thing that you're working on. Okay. So I think that would be the big one. And then also too, right, the design of the character I think could be improved and pushed further. So if the character is Valkyrie, right, like what design inspiration besides like the wings on the ears really make this character feel that like that identity, right? It might be better to, before actually designing anything, to write down some notes about the character's personality, the abilities that this character uses, in order to, right, like help you to choose different design like paths within your sketches, right? So I can see that you did like a bird here, right? So that kind of falls in line with Sky, who's an agent that already exists. So trying to find like a different identity possibly, right? Where, you know, Valkyries are associated with, you know, Nordic mythology and things like that. So what can you pull from that really makes this character stand out in their personality, but also the design, right? So like when I look at this design in particular, I don't think I don't think this character would be named Valkyrie, right? Just so trying to find that identity to the name and to the character, right, is something that I think is really important for this particular piece. Now, if we go to the rest of your stuff here, let's take a look at this. I think this is heading in the right path, like right direction, right? I think that the environment is rendered well, represented well. I think that this character or the statue here, you'd probably be seeing more of the underside of the chin, right? Unless he's like really looking down and like pressing his chin into his neck. So you'd probably be seeing more of the underside, and I think it'd be actually more interesting if the statue was looking up, right? That way we don't see his full face. That kind of gives him a more majestic feeling, that we don't get to see his full features, right? Because we're below him. But this is heading in the right direction. Now, a couple of things like this dog here, three-headed dog has way too many highlights on him. So it makes him stand out way more than he should, right? So toning that kind of stuff down and really trying to concentrate on like what the focus of the piece is supposed to be about. So if the focus is the statue and that's the thing that we're supposed to really hone in on, then make sure that this character doesn't distract us. Because if you squint, right, if you squint at the painting and step back, that is a very high contrast piece. Same with the character down here. We could tone down the value of the shirt, tone down the highlights here, and make them kind of a secondary read and make this the first read. Okay. I'll go over one more piece here. And I'll go over this environment. Okay, so for the environment here, I think you really need to take a step back and think about what you're trying to accomplish at the very beginning of the piece before you start any sketches or anything like that, and say, okay, I want this to be like a grand castle in a foresty, foggy type environment. You could think kind of like Castlevania, right? So like if that's the thing, then look up Castlevania type environments, and then you can look up there's amazing concept art out there from the recent show, right? And see how they approached it, and then try to find a reference photo, like especially if this is where you're at in your ability, I would say find a reference photo that has some sort of castle in it, and then use that as the starting point. So like so for example, if like you have a shot where you have like a horizon line here, and there's like a castle here, and there's like some trees here and like trees there, and there's like a small little tree here, and there's like a river that like runs through the shot like this, right? So like this is the shot that you found on Google. My recommendation would be to use this shot as like, this is the composition I'm going to use, because this composition has everything figured out. It has lighting that I want as well. And then you change the castle to like be whatever it is that you want it to be. It's got like spikes here or whatever, spikes like right here, and you design it to be exactly the type of castle you want, but it has the composition from the original photo, and you go from there. That's going to really help you to solve a lot of the problems that are present here, right? So for example, the overuse of the cloud brush here, the stacking of these things, they don't feel like they're actually rounding form. The way that you have the highlights here, it actually feels like they're made of paper, right? They're like two-dimensional pieces. So like what I mean by that is, like if you have a piece of paper like this, right? Sorry. It doesn't feel like it's a cube, right? It feels like it's just like a two-dimensional piece of paper that's like that thick. So, and that's because of the way that you're rendering the highlight. Instead of the light rounding the form all the way to here, it's just rounding this corner highlight. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, I think using reference is going to be the thing that really helps to push your pieces to like a more realistic level, and try to simplify your ideas, I think, to start, because here, like this stuff here and this stuff here, right? I think they're repeated elements. Or actually, these are probably not creatures. These are probably part of the castle, maybe. I'm not sure. But yeah, again, I think just using reference is going to be the biggest thing to help you out here, because it's very difficult to read. There's a lot of like unnecessary cloud brush work, and the values are all over the place. So studying from photos and studying from life is going to help you to understand how color and light works, and values, and how value structures work. And then once you've done a lot of studying, and you've done studies that also translate to your own work, then you can start making up compositions from yourself that are going to feel more successful, right? So I know it sounds boring and terrible, but study is kind of the the advice here. So in general, I think for right now, my advice is to not like focus on trying to make like a industry ready portfolio. I think it's just to continue studying the basics, and then to apply it to your personal work. So right, like if, for example, like on this one, try to, like, I think this environment is working pretty well, right? Like there's good atmospheric perspective back here. The character is silhouetted nicely, though I think that she could be darker to fit the environment. But the point being is that if you were to do a study of this type of photo, and then after you did that study, you did a concept that was similar to the study that you did, right? So that you can apply the things that you learned. That's where you're going to get the most amount of growth. Okay. And just continue to do that. And I think you'll be well on your way. Okay. So that wraps up episode 1. So feel free to let me know what you guys think about this, whether this is something that you liked. And again, if you do want to have your portfolio reviewed, remember just to comment down a link about your portfolio. Tell me what you want to do, and have at least 5 pieces. So yeah, thanks again for taking a look at this video, and hopefully that you learned something from these reviews, right? Hopefully you learned something that you can take to your own work and improve on your own portfolio.